Hello, welcome to AI in Action. My name is Maurie. I'm here with my husband, Jim. And tonight we are going to start the first of a three-part series concerning data centers. This last episode we did was basically telling you what we were about to do, and now we're going to get started delivering what we promised. So in this first episode, we are going to define what a data center is and who it is that typically builds them. We're also going to cover where they are, an estimate of how many there currently are and how many they're wanting to build in the United States. And then we're going to cover why the industry actually wants to build them and why the industry actually needs them. Of course, we have people who oppose them, including the impacts they have on power, water, and land use. So we're going to cover that also. The way that we're going to do this, I think, is we're going to do it like a long read to begin with. And then we're going to talk a little bit in between. But this is going to be a lot of information that we're going to be giving you guys. It's very important that if you're a city manager or a city official or a school administrator, or even if you're just a concerned citizen that really wants to know more about what may be coming to your backyard any day now, you need to listen to this episode, the two to follow. That would be my advice. Jim is an engineer. I am an educator. And because of that, he has done all of the research that you are going to need to know about data centers. We did this because we know that informed decisions is what needs to happen. When we brought in, or Jim specifically brought in infrastructure into our small community, he had to know everything, all of the research, all the information, all the T's to cross, all the I's to dot. And so he did this research for you, and we're going to put this on our website, all the materials that he found. Our website is aiedpro.com. After this episode, there'll be a link there. So if y'all want to go look at the research yourself, you can.
Just so everybody knows, as a disclaimer, you cannot do research anymore without using AI. Google has built it into everything.
That is correct.
So you can't. So I did use AI. I did check as many of the sources and everything as I could, but I didn't check everything. So there could be some errors, but I don't think there's enough that it matters. And because I think at the end of the day, a lot of the reason I did this had to do with what we went through trying to develop our own infrastructure.
Right.
You know, we had a lot of issues that I had to learn the hard way.
With right of ways and insurance.
Yeah. And we were just bringing fiber and we have, our own small data centers at the school district. They're still data centers. They still have exactly the same problems. So when you look at the accumulation of what we've gone through over the last 20 some odd years and all these different things that we've had to go through, I thought it was worth the research.
We have the experience. We all know that in modern life, we run on digital activity, correct? That's where I want to start. I want to start with, we use it for global finance. We stream movies, music, we keep medical records digitally, and it all happens in what we like to refer to as the cloud. That's what we hear all the time. It's in the cloud. But in reality, we're talking about physical locations where all of this actually happens. If you follow the tech space, which since you're watching or listening to AI in Action, you probably do, you know that the sheer physical scale required to run our digital world is massive. And it's quietly getting larger and larger. It is one of the most massive infrastructure challenges of our time to continue to feed us our digital fix, I guess is what you can call it.
Everything.
Okay, let's talk about that physical footprint. That's the part that we're going to be discussing today. And as an AI likes to say, we're going to dive or delve.
The word delve used to be okay. The fact that it's been abused by AI so much, you can't even use that or those little M-dash things anymore.
I love to tell the story that I was reading a book one day and I saw the word delve and I was like, oh my God, this is AI written. And I looked and it was published in like 2010. So yeah. We've mentioned the cloud. We upload our lives to it. Okay. We run our business software on it, and it sounds like it's this magical, weightless thing that's floating in the air above us. That is the visual that you get when you think of the word cloud. But It has a physical address. Literally, it has a physical address. It is sprawling infrastructure. It needs millions of tons of steel, bundles and bundles of fiber optic, concrete, gallons and gallons and gallons of water, and backup generators. Basically, the cloud not only has a physical address, it has thousands of physical addresses. Just for the ease of thinking about a data center, it's kind of like a very large, self-sustaining facility for housing a lot of computers. So that is the definition that Jim and I came up with for a data center. I'm going to repeat that. It is a physical location that is used, that is self-sustaining to house a lot of computers. They're not just big warehouses holding rows and rows of, like, your blinking servers. They are very, very highly engineered. It's like a standalone survival system. Let me make it as this contrast for you. When you think about a data center, a lot of people just think about a warehouse. It's this building that has shelves and stuff in it. Well, that's not what it is. Think of it more like a hospital ICU or a hospital operating center, okay? These guys are designed to deliver absolutely constant power. They aggressively remove like mind-boggling amounts of heat. And most importantly, they have to survive utility failures continuously, just like that ICU or that medical facility has to do.
When we had the great ice storm here, where did you want to be?
Next to the hospital.
Next to the hospital, because that part of the grid, they have redundancy built in generally to keep that part of the grid up.
Right. Yep. That's part of the law. The critical infrastructure is supposed to have this redundancy built in.
We thought of that whenever I got the fiber here.
Right.
I mean, how we brought fiber in actually makes us part of critical infrastructure.
Correct.
So there's laws that are in place that help us when it comes to keeping our internet connection to the school district.
Correct. So literally, if the local power grid, like Jim was just talking about, goes completely dark, these facilities are engineered so that the servers inside of them never even blink. They are these windowless boxes, so it is very tempting to think of them as just a standard warehouse. It's much more accurate to think of it like a hospital operating room.
Basically, you spend a lot of time, because I do this with our little small data centers, it's reliability engineering at a massive scale. Correct. Because you're industrial. I mean, even with our data centers, we have backup power systems, we have redundant switches, we have AC units with temperature monitoring. We have the smaller version of that. Think about when we went to the University of Texas and they had some of their systems are liquid cool. It was cold in there. I mean, there's a lot that goes into what they call survivability engineering.
Exactly.
It's got to be reliable.
Exactly. It needs to have redundancy, like you just said, precise and rock solid climate control. It also needs those emergency backups.
Yep.
Because they don't want anything to ever go down. And it is at this very, very large industrial scale.
If it goes down, you could lose access to Netflix temporarily.
Temporarily. And it's funny because if stuff like that does go down, you can see it immediately. All the
there's websites that check it. Yeah, there's downtime. I mean, ChatGPT went down yesterday.
Right.
And the number of complaints climbs at a massive rate.
Very, very quickly.
Anyway.
Well, it happens if our network goes down in our little bitty area too.
Yes.
I mean, we start getting the phone calls immediately.
Yes.
Text messages immediately. So the demand for that reliability used to be fairly constant, but now it is absolutely skyrocketing. And that is because of the evolution of artificial intelligence. So if you think about how fast AI has changed just in the last 4 years, it started out as basic chatbots, and then, a chatbot. Let's define a chatbot for people who might not know what that is. You ask one question, it processes that one question, and you get an answer. That's a chatbot. And it doesn't take a lot of tokens to have a chatbot. It doesn't burn through a lot of tokens. But now we've moved on to advanced AI that's doing multi-stage retrieval analysis at the same time.
The first next big step was reasoning models. And reasoning models could do multi-stage analysis.
Right.
That was the next big step. That was
2 years ago?
Nah,
3 years ago?
it's closer to, I mean, it happened pretty much toward the end of that first year that they released
2022?
2023. 2023, late 2023, early 20. So 2024 was the big year for reasoning models.
Okay. And
Anyway,
now what do we
now
have? Agents.
it's all about agents now.
All about agents. It's autonomous systems that don't just, answer a question, but they operate continuously. They never sleep. They're going off and doing things in the background. They're constantly talking to other servers. They're constantly analyzing data. They're just always there, always on. So when the software runs autonomously, say that fast 4 times, and it performs like hundreds of steps instead of just that one step that we started out with when you said, what's the weather? That computational demand, it's insane, and it causes an intense amount of heat. It creates an intense.
And you need a little bit, because you need a lot of servers. You need a lot of servers, and the servers generate heat.
So it's very physically challenging now because of the amount of heat this is causing. Let's put this into perspective for you based on the research that Jim did. Now I'm going to be reading some of this, okay? A new AI system, they are demanding like an astonishing 30 to 50 or more kilowatts, okay, for a single rack. Now, previously, before artificial intelligence, we were drawing 5 to 10 kilowatts of power.
Just to give you a relative idea, my AC unit, our AC unit in our house, if you have heat strips instead of the thing
right,
we have,
you put on emergency heat and the heat strips come on.
That's 10 kilowatts.
Okay, so that's an air conditioner.
Basically, it's an AC heating unit.
And that's what it used to be.
Yes.
So now the demand is up to 30 to 50 or more kilowatts for a single rack. What's a rack? A rack is that metal thing that computers sit in.
You load servers into it.
You load servers into them. So
now
it's
you load GPUs into it.
3 to 5 times more power usage per rack. And as I said about the thousands of physical addresses, there are thousands and thousands of racks. So since computers basically turn electricity directly into heat, your traditional air cooling that we used to have in the data centers, where we just had it kind of cold in there. We've been in these centers before where you always put a jacket on. They tell you ahead of time because it is cold. They can't just blow cold air down the aisles anymore to keep these things. The heat density is way too high. So AI is forcing the entire industry toward what they call a direct-to-chip liquid cooling. This is the shift from the simple fans over to a liquid cooling tube that runs through the server racks themselves.
Our test server that we have for AI that we use at this school has liquid cooling.
Yes.
Now, it's board level liquid cooling, not chip level, but it's the same idea. The thing to remember about cooling, though, is I don't care what you use to remove that heat, liquid or otherwise, you still have to get rid of the heat.
Heat has to go somewhere.
It's still got to leave that liquid somewhere.
Has to vent somewhere. So you might guess that all of this extreme engineering does not come cheap. So how cheap? How about a $921 million price tag? How does that sound? What Jim did is he did a feasibility report that modeled a very basic 50 megawatt rural AI facility or data center, okay? And the upper end cost estimate for just one of these mid-sized data center campuses was $921 million, almost $1 billion. And what's crazy is that the actual building, like the concrete walls and the roof, that was only a tiny fraction of what that cost came from. What the cost came from was mechanical, electrical, plumbing. We're talking about custom switchgear, massive transformers, heavy-duty cooling pumps, and of course, those industrial diesel generators that they have to have for backup.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about those later.
Yes.
I used to work in an office building that had those. They had to test them once a quarter. And when we were on the 5th floor, and when these things were down on the basement floor, the bottom floor, but on the parking lot side. And when they turned them on, I could hear them on the 5th floor with the windows closed.
Correct.
So they were loud and diesel smoke everywhere.
Yeah, really. So how many of these data centers are there and where are they being built? this is something I found really interesting. If you actually track the infrastructure, it's very difficult to find. The current research that Jim found indicates that the United States has roughly 4,000 to over 5,400 operating data centers already here in the United States only. And that's a big gap between that 4,000 number up to that 5,400 number. And I specifically said, Jim, I don't understand. They can't tell you how many data centers they have in the United States. And it's because they're being a little wonky on how they get those numbers, okay? They're wonky because sometimes they call a data center like a facility that has 5 or 6 buildings that are combined in one facility, and they just call that like one data center.
When in reality, it's 4 or 5
exactly
clumped together.
Exactly. And they're not really wanting to be transparent about how they're telling you this information. And a lot of it might come down to like corporate secrecy, and it could be for a lot of reasons, and not all of them have to be nefarious. I mean, that could just be, protecting assets. They also use shell companies or anonymous LLCs to buy up land, mostly to prevent land speculation. They don't want to get into a bidding war. And then just to keep their competitors in the dark so that they don't know where they're looking at building. I remember when Walgreens would put in something, 6 months later, there's a CVS across the street.
Well,
and you have to wonder why. And it's because they know that somebody's done those traffic patterns. Somebody's already, done boots on the ground and done the surveys and figured it all out. And so it helps them not spend as much money before they buy up a piece of land.
When we lived in Florida, they talked about Walt Disney when he was looking at expanding from California to Florida.
Yes.
He spent a lot of time out there secretly buying up land because he wanted that cheap land that
the swamp
cheap
land
and flat that Florida had because he could build on it. But he knew that if people found out he was buying up all that land, that people would start buying up the land around it.
Right.
So
for hotels and everything else.
Sell it back to him or sell it to hotels, and it would jack the land price up.
Right.
So there's a lot of reasons. Some of them are nefarious, but most of them are just
business.
Well, they're trying to keep the prices
They're
down.
doing business. Honestly, regardless of the exact count, I just want you to think about the sheer volume that this physical footprint is starting to have in the United States. And forecasting for those construction pipelines is very wild. I mean, right now, the industry analysts, they don't even bother counting the buildings anymore. What they're worried about is not the physical, but the capacity.
Electrical.
What is the capacity of these electrical loads that we're going to be putting in here?
Do you have the electrical capacity? They literally measure them now in electrical usage.
Right. So if you have a town that has no electricity, you're safe.
You ain't going to build one in Llano? Good luck with that.
By the end of 2025, the North American Construction Pipeline, that's what it's called, it was estimated at being able to have or having 35 gigawatts.
I think it came in a little under that, but that's still pretty close to the number. That's a big number.
Right. So put it in perspective. 1 single gigawatt is roughly the electrical output of a large nuclear reactor.
Yes, which there are some companies now that are trying to get the nuclear in the United States, the whole nuclear thing, building nuclear reactors kind of died
off.
Well, it died in the 70s when
After 3 Mile.
3 Mile Island, had the big meltdown. And then, of course, what happened in Japan when they had the tsunami and they had the melt. So people are obviously afraid of it. Plus, we drove by the facilities where they get rid of the nuclear material out in
West Texas.
No, it was in New Mexico, I think. Bottom line is that people are trying to revive it, but it takes a long time I don't care what you do, it takes a long time to build a nuclear power plant.
It does, but I want to go back and put that in perspective one more time because 35 gigawatts, that's what that pipeline has. That's 1 nuclear reactor, or it's anywhere from 1 to 5 coal mines or natural gas plants.
Not coal mines, but coal plants.
Like the plants,
Yes.
like the coal processing
coal burning
centers.
plants. Coal burning plants. In other words, your electrical generation is either coming from coal or from natural gas.
Right.
And usually the size of those is about a half a gigawatt for the natural gas or the coal burning. Some of them are smaller.
Right.
But if you assume that their maximum size, because the natural gas ones especially can get up to a gigawatt, but that means you would have to have 35 or more of those, whether it's a nuclear or otherwise, for these 35, because a typical, data center could be a gigawatt. A gigawatt's a big data center.
So the North American construction pipeline basically was saying, or what we were saying, is that the tech industry was literally trying to build the equivalent of 35 nuclear power plants worth of electrical draw in a very short window of time.
Yes.
We were trying to get that infrastructure laid down as quickly as we possibly could.
Yes.
That's
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a
lot.
lot. So who wanted
And
it?
we've got more.
We've got more. Who wanted it? Let's talk about this for a minute. The 35 gigawatt pipeline was wanted, according to your research, by a fragmented web of ownership.
Yeah, it was. When you think about the ownership part, it wasn't the end customer was what you would think would want it.
Right.
But in reality, remember when we were at the school, they come in and a big construction management company would bid on our
Bonds
our
or
bonds
whatever.
or whatever to build, whatever new section of the school. But then they subcontracted it out to a lot of different people. We're the end customer, but a lot of people were involved in the build process.
Right. And this
Same
is
kind
what's
of thing.
happening. It used to be simple. A big tech company would come in or just a bigger company like, oh, Walmart just bought that big piece of property. I wonder what's going to come in there.
Or
Walmart
Microsoft
is,
or Google.
or Samsung building or, whatever. They would do that. But now they don't do it that way. They have specialized developers like Vantage, QTS. I think you saw Aligned.
I never heard of most of these
Russo,
companies. I never heard of
there's
these
all these
companies.
companies out there that you can find on the internet, and they come in and they secure the land and also get the power rights, okay? And then they bring in a mega general contractor like what, Turner or Morton or Walbridge or one of these like real big billion-dollar construction companies, and they come in and they manage what they're doing. Okay.
These companies you mentioned earlier, they literally, just like the people that built the schools for us or that build large, their specialty was building school stuff.
And that's all
these guys' specialty is building data centers. And these large construction companies that you mentioned as well, they specialize in managing large construction projects. Because data center
Those huge fiber bundles that have to come in or whatever, you have a company that manages that. The big huge generators, the big, putting the big diesel.
Somebody's got to
tanks.
order all those parts.
Somebody has to do it. So what happens is after they get it built, then the famous tech giants whose AI models we're actually using, like Anthropic or Google or Amazon or all of these big tech giants, they then come in and become the tenant of those data centers.
Or they may have been the one that owned it outright. You don't know.
But they keep it really confidential.
Yes.
A lot of times they keep it really confidential during the actual local zoning approvals because the company asking for approval is typically not a famous brand name. And it's a way, again, I understand why they do it sometimes because if Amazon's buying up a whole bunch of land somewhere, then Google's going to take notice. Or,
Yes, but I put this in there, though, for a specific reason. If you are a city manager, if you are who is doing it makes a lot of difference to you.
Who is pulling their strings?
Well, it's all, in many cases, I think my research looked like it's almost better in some cases if a Google or a Microsoft or somebody is the one who ends up owning it because they're there to stay and they have a brand that's very public that they don't want tarnished.
Right.
We're going to talk more about that in our later episodes. But at the end of the day,
they need to be a good community member.
And being a good community member, they may actually be better than it's like these construction companies that come in that we've dealt with for so many years in these different bond packages, some of them fairly large. When you start talking about construction like that, you really want somebody that cares. So anyway, moving on. I really wanted to put some stuff in there about why they want it.
Okay. So I like this. We called it in a previous podcast, we called our current economy the attention economy. Okay. That's what everybody's buying for is they want your attention. They want your eyes on their video. They want your eyes on their post, attention economy. Sure. And we still have quite a bit of an attention economy.
Oh, that's not going away.
But now we can call it a token economy.
Yes.
Would you explain to me what that means?
Well, the simplest explanation is that no matter what you do, these people, when you hear about all these AI companies, at the end of the day, what they sell is tokens. Now, those tokens can be rearranged, which effectively they do that for you, into words, phrases, math problems. It doesn't matter what the information is. At the end of the day, it's all about those tokens. And how fast they can generate those tokens is everything. Like if you're generating yourself, maybe you can generate, 50 tokens per second. They can generate hundreds or 1,000 per second. So how fast they can generate them and how many they can generate them.
All right, so I need to put this into a perspective that I can understand. Is a token almost like a pixel?
No, it's three-fourths of a word.
But that's what I'm saying. If I go to build a picture, okay, and I'm putting that picture together, I have all of these pixels I have to put together before the picture appears. So if I am asking a question, and even if that answer is going to be a sentence or a math equation or anything like that, it has to take all the tokens, depending upon the complexity of what I'm asking, and all those tokens have to fit together, which is why some things take more tokens, some things take less tokens.
Well, you can.
Or am I just completely off base and I need to edit this out of the podcast?
No, you're not. You're not that off base. But instead of thinking of it as a pixel, think of it as a group of pixels.
Okay.
And each token is a different size group. So you can think of it like Lego blocks if you want to.
Okay.
A box full of Lego blocks is just blocks. But as you start assembling them, they become something.
Okay.
And that pattern that they become is either a picture you're looking at or a vision in your head. In the case of AI, they're assembling those tokens, which are percentages of words. They're predicting what the words are you're looking for, and they're assembling those tokens into those words.
Okay.
So you're not wrong. You're assembling a picture, and that picture in this case could be a sentence.
Okay.
What I thought was interesting, which I put the research in here for you, was I looked at May of 2026 because
Not
again,
too long ago.
if I'm gonna say this is the token economy, how many tokens are we talking about? So I gave you some nice numbers
How
there.
many tokens are we talking about? A couple billion?
A few more, a few more. I left you some numbers.
You said this to me. I was like, I had to get you to tell me what it meant. I'm gonna do that tonight too. I'm gonna say, okay, tell me what that means. So according to the research in May of 2026, which this is July of 2026, so this is very recent, the monthly token usage for all companies.
Well, for all people.
Right. Everyone did an AI thing. Everyone who asked an AI.
Everybody, this is how many were generated.
Okay. The tokens generated were 3.2 quadrillion tokens.
That's correct.
What's quadrillion?
It is 1 followed by 15 zeros. So
Elon Musk's next goal for money. To be a quadrillionaire.
Yeah,
By 2030, okay, they're estimating that it's going to jump from 3.2 quadrillion, and this is per month.
Correct.
Up to 120 quadrillion tokens.
Per month,
A
yes.
month.
That's a 24x increase.
And then by 2040?
55x increase. So you're talking about, assuming these numbers are even close to accurate, you're talking about, again, the token economy. That's why they want these data centers so bad, because they can't generate this many tokens. What they're already doing in the token economy is if you use their APIs, instead of if you get a flat monthly ChatGPT account for $20 a month, you're gonna start getting in the slow lane, just like they've been trying to do for years with internet traffic. They're gonna put you in the slow lane because the people that are buying the tokens individually and doing a pay-per usage, they're not subsidizing them.
Right.
They're paying per token.
Right.
But if you're doing $20 a month, they let you float over, which means they're subsidizing the number. They can only generate for $20. I mean, the tokens are pennies, less than pennies each. But they can only subsidize.
They don't have the capacity.
They don't have the capacity. That's what they want all these.
And tokens are generated by
GPUs, which are in servers, which are in big data centers. That's correct.
So let's talk about that now.
Yep.
Power, water, and land. Those things are all going to be required for those tokens to be generated.
Yep.
And we are becoming more and more token addicted.
People are trying to say they're not, but those numbers, we went from 0 in 2022 to 3.2 quadrillion in May of
Yeah,
2026.
and I'm sorry. People say they're not addicted, they don't use AI, and then you ask them, "Oh, you don't use Google?" And they're like, "Oh, no, I do."
Well,
And I love it that it tells me at the very top now the answer, and I don't have to like search for it in a
well,
paper. I'm like,
there's
in
a
other
lot.
words, you're using AI.
They may or may not know that. They didn't ask for that. But
No, but
the
that's what I'm
ones that are a
saying.
little bit hypocritical are the ones that, like, I read an article the other day about the younger people saying they hated AI, but they're well known to use AI to do
To
their
get
research
something
papers and to
done.
do their, to get things done.
Hmm.
It's sort of like I hate automobiles and I
But I
hate what they
drive
stand for,
one.
but I drive one anyway. So,
Yeah.
you know,
But my point was that a lot of people say they're not using AI. They're not the ones making that decision as to about whether
yeah,
or not they're using AI.
yeah,
Someone else is making that
that's
decision
still
for them.
that's a whole different argument that you
We
could
might have
definitely
to talk about that one day.
maybe.
But let's think about that land, the power, and the water. It's an incredible scale. It's incredible. The industry is rapidly expanding and it's coming out of the traditional hubs. Used to, you had to be like Northern Virginia
Yeah, I've been to the
and
Northern Virginia places, and a lot of those data centers were built because that was the telecom hub before the big telecom crash.
correct.
And so there was a massive data centers built for the telecom people.
Hmm.
And, Northern Virginia, I guess, had plenty of, they
They
already
have
built it.
water. They
Well, they
have,
already built out the power infrastructure there
right,
too because of all the telecom stuff. It's
right.
just like we inherited all this fiber we use now from the telecom and the
Dot
dot
coms.
com. It's again, we talk about waves versus bubbles.
Correct.
Well, the waves crash, but the stuff keeps going
Infrastructure
forward. The
is still
infrastructure
there.
keeps going forward.
That's right. It's happened ever since, I don't know, the railroad. It's been happening forever. But what they're doing now is they're not staying in the Northern Virginia area because there's not enough left. There's not land and they're starting to run low on resources. So now they're having to go look at entirely new markets. And they aren't just throwing a dart at a map and they're not just looking for like, this cheap rural land. The location decision is actually being dominated by one very specific question that these companies are asking. And that is, how quickly can I obtain the power that I need to run my data center if I build in this location?
So if you're wondering if you're in one of the locations they're targeting, how big are the power lines near you?
How
Because
close are you? How close are you to the power?
if the power lines, if there's a massive amount of power infrastructure where you are and you're rural, you're a target. Especially if unless you're in the mountains, you've got flat land. If you're flat land and you've got big power grid coming all near you,
Right.
you're a place they're looking.
Yeah, that's where they're looking. So finding a few hundred acres of cheap farmland is absolutely worthless to the developer if the local utility company says it's going to take, 8 months, a year, whatever, to get like transmission lines to connect you to the grid. I think that's why one of the things here in Texas that we're starting to see is these data centers are coming into areas that we're like, wait a second, there's not a lot of water there, but it is wind and sun and solar, and there's all of these infrastructures already built out, like in West Texas, that there's a lot of power lines already out there.
The power lines are what they're looking for because when you're talking about the amount of power they want, you can't generate it with a wind farm or a solar farm.
Right. They're just looking for those big power lines.
They'll take the power from those.
Oh, absolutely.
No problem, but they're still going to have more power.
Absolutely. So let's put this into an environmental footprint and put it into perspective, okay? If we look at the 50 megawatt simulation that
yes.
Jim had done earlier, we're not just talking about like building on a lot. So what we're talking about is clearing like 50 to 100 acres of land for a smaller data center. That's not even a really big data center. We're talking about needing about 475 gallons of cooling water is what I call it, the stuff that's going to be running through those pipes to keep all those chips and stuff cool. And that's every minute. That's not like a day. 475 gallons of cooling water every single minute.
Now, I tried very hard to find a way. I looked a lot for those numbers, and that number is what the simulation came up with for me. That number could be larger. It could be, I don't think it's going to be smaller, but it could be larger.
But mathematically, that's what you came up
well,
with.
what I came up with when I was doing all my research trying to find this out.
Right. And think about it. This is like summer, hot summer month, middle of Texas, it's definitely going to be using a lot of water to keep that system running. Okay. And it has to guarantee that hospital grade reliability. So a site like this will need 30 to 35 large diesel backup generators, sitting on, like, 1,000 gallons of what I call on-site fuel storage. So the big fuel tanks, they'll have to have a couple of those there too, so that they can always keep those generators, full. And then all that supporting equipment also has to have, like, operational reality. What if I'm right next door? Okay. What if I live right next door and then I'm hearing the noise and everything? So there's all those realities.
As we're moving into the pros and cons section of it, I mean, when you start thinking about that, I mean, the Elon Musk factory in Georgia, there was a huge complaint about it because of those diesel generators.
Yes.
So when you're talking about being a good neighbor, running a big diesel generator at 3 o'clock in the morning because the power grid's down right next to my house, I'm probably not going to be happy with you.
And we're going to talk about this in one of the other episodes, because I can remember a conversation I had with your father, rest his soul. He and I had an argument because he did not want to live in an area that had
Zoning laws.
He did not like zoning laws because he wanted to do what he wanted to do with his property. And I kept talking to him about how those zoning laws give you protection. And he was like, I don't care. I want to do what I want to do with my property. Well, then someone bought the little house right next door to him.
Right next to his land.
And they started parking 18-wheelers that were refrigerated trucks. And they left their compressors, air conditioning compressors, on all night long.
The diesels were running all night long.
All night
long. So you could hear them idling.
All night long.
He hated it.
I loved it whenever he complained about it, because I was able to say,
guess what? That's what zoning laws are for.
About zoning laws. But I mean, we're going to talk about that. Let's think about this for a second. If you have dozens of industrial cooling fans on the roof of a massive building, you have these chillers, you have the water pumps, you have the backup generators, you have all this stuff, and they're being tested. The noise that your dad was going through with those 18-wheelers that were sitting next to his house, that is nothing compared to what the noise is going to be made when they're testing all that stuff.
I mentioned it earlier. They used to, because they had to test it because of the fact that they had promised the people in that building that we would never lose power. So they tested them once a quarter.
Yeah. And so they have to make sure that
fired those babies up once a quarter. Now, they didn't do it at 3 a.m, but they still fired them up.
Right. We are going to talk about pros and cons. I know that tonight, the data and the way that we're kind of talking, we're like, oh my God, this is absolutely horrible. We don't want this to happen, because of the information that we've given you is kind of,
it feels a little negative. It feels a little negative. It wasn't intending to be.
Right.
When I was doing the research, I didn't try to bias it toward a negative, because I use AI. It's hypocritical for someone who talks about AI all the time to talk about not building these data centers.
And the reason we're doing these 3 things is because these 3 episodes, and the first one's just kind of defining what is coming and what is a data center and what does it take to have a data center.
How big are they?
How big are they? We're doing this because when you get ready to have those town hall meetings, when you get ready to have those conversations all across this country, there's going to be tension, okay? You're going to have a local mayor that might look at the promised benefits that the company has said is going to happen. They're going to get a massive expansion in their tax base. They're going to get lots of, like, great construction jobs, and they're going to be willing to pay for the new road or a new elementary campus, or, whatever it is they're going to pay for.
Well,
okay.
And the problem with these benefits are, and we're going to talk again about that later, but that tax base, most of those companies, when they come in, they want a tax break.
That's right.
Because they have remember how valuable we said that equipment is? Well, that taxes are coming based on the value of that equipment. Just like in a restaurant, we had all this capital equipment we had to pay taxes on.
Right.
And so they don't want to pay those taxes because, and again, it's those companies that are building this purely as a way of either renting it out or selling it to somebody else. They're all about getting it built and getting the profit as fast as they can.
Absolutely.
It's capitalism, right?
Absolutely.
Well,
we live in a capitalistic society.
When you start talking about that tax base expansion, they're going to argue with you. You need to know that right up front. They're going to come in and asking for that.
And so your mayor is going to say, or some of your city leaders are going to say, this is going to be great. This is what it's going to bring out to us. And then you're going to have the opposite side where you're looking at your community members that are going to start looking at, okay, what about the burden? What about the huge strain on the electrical grid? What about the real risk of your utility rates going up? The continuous noise that we've been talking about, okay? The massive water consumption, the permanent loss of land. I mean, if they buy the land and build, I know quite often you'll be driving through a town that the town has kind of disappeared. And there's huge, even in the cities, there's these huge mall complexes that the malls are basically abandoned. And so you have this stuff that you have to come in and tear it down later. So that's a lot of friction, right? And it really boils down to like a unique economic reality of the tech industry. If you stop and think about it, a project might bring like $3 billion in capital investment, and it could take up to hundreds of acres or ask for major tax incentives or anything like that. But once that construction is finished and the tension arises because these projects employ a relatively modest number of like permanent workers, those permanent workers, there's not many of them.
No,
there's 50 to 100, maybe.
And if you're in a small town, like in Atlanta, if you told us you're going to hire 100 people,
that's a lot.
That's a lot. The problem is that in many cases, some of the most automatable systems in the world are data centers. So they may, if they start out with 100, they're not going to end up with 100. No. They're going to continuously be trying to reduce the number of employees. And in many cases, it's like these construction firms. Our superintendent on the last bond tried very hard to push them toward local people, but they would say the local people didn't have the expertise they needed. So they ended up bringing in all the crews, just as what they planned on doing in the first place. They brought in these crews to do the work, and then the crews left.
Right.
And they didn't stay on. And with these data centers, if you came to Llano right now, we don't have 100 people with the qualifications to be in a data center.
Right.
To run a data center. We have a handful.
Right. But let's look at it this way too. I wanted to bring up that if you're thinking of bringing industry into your community and you're on like, the economic development board or things like that, if you're looking at a data center that's coming into your town versus an automobile manufacturer,
any manufacturer.
Or any manufacturing facility.
That doesn't manufacture tokens.
Exactly. Something that manufactures something that's physical, tangible, something that you can touch. You're looking at the difference between, those 100 employees that then dwindles down to like 50, that dwindles down to 10, with like thousands of employees could maintain.
That's what they used to hire.
Job.
That's what they used to hire was, when Ford Motor Company came in and built something outside of Detroit, they hired thousands and thousands of people. And these were long-term, really good paying jobs.
Made a living.
That's not what this is.
No, it is not.
It's similar to the cryptocurrency stuff. I mean, these crypto people that came into all these small towns, very similar. They were literally making a sort of a token themselves.
Yes,
they were making these cryptocurrency.
Very similar.
And they were Well, these are the same thing. And if you want to go ask a town that ended up with one of these crypto farms how much money they made on them, I bet you're going to find out that what was promised wasn't there. And many of those cryptocurrency companies went away. And those crypto farms that they had set up, luckily, AI came along and they started buying up all the GPUs and those data centers.
And that's what I used to argue about. When people would ask me when we were speaking at conferences and things like that, they would talk to me about the data centers and the electrical usage and stuff. And a few years ago, I could easily say, well, we've already built out this infrastructure because of crypto. And now these empty houses, empty warehouses, empty centers are being taken over by artificial intelligence, which is a good thing because they've just been sitting there. Yeah. Okay. I think we've kind of outgrown that box now.
Well, they've already sucked all those up. Now they need a lot more. And I didn't put the exact number in. The research you're going to post actually has the estimated numbers in them. Okay. I just couldn't shove it all into this podcast. We're going to post like 3 documents or 3 research things that I did. And we got to throw in an infographic in there too, because I have a good infographic.
Jim loves his infographics.
I love infographics. But anyway.
The next part of the series that we're going to talk about, because we're out of time for tonight, is who's getting to decide if it's an auto manufacturer versus a data center that's coming to your town. Okay. And the ultimate
gets to decide
question,
even if they're coming to your town,
right?
Do you get to decide?
Right. Who gets to decide? Who gets to say yes or no? The ultimate question is who has the authority. Okay. Whenever these mega developments come to a town, we see immediately that you have competing interests that are colliding at literally like every level of society. You have your local or micro level, which is your local residents, and they're like trying to protect their quality of life. But then if you go out a little bit, you end up having like the regional utilities who are like trying to maintain grid stability. And they're like, oh, well, if one of these is close, then we're going to have grid stability, and they're going to help us provide that grid
Well,
stability.
they're going to help us provide infrastructure build out.
So we can
So
have
their
it.
perspectives are the point of this research that I did was the smallest one in there is the guy who cares about
The land
the
and
land and the quality of life and all that other stuff. As you start zooming out, they don't care about that.
Right. If you zoom out another level, then you're going to be looking at like your state governments. And state governments are actively competing with each other for the massive multi-dollar projects to come into their states.
Billions of dollars.
Billions of dollars. And a lot of it has to do with, campaign money, I should say. And then if you go right up to the very top of it, you're looking at your federal policy that, as of now, is prioritizing domestic AI expansion in the United States because they're saying it's like for national security reasons and for global economic dominance. And so it isn't just a simple binary debate about, being pro-tech or being, anti-tech. What it is it's a fundamental structural debate that's going to be happening about the local autonomy of your town versus our national technology strategy.
Or the strategy of these multi-billion-dollar companies. Oracle, I saw today, is suing. There was a town that was saying they decided they couldn't build
an Oracle place?
a data center for Oracle, and Oracle suing them, saying that they can't stop it. This is not the way you're a good neighbor.
No.
But this is these multi-billion-dollar corporations, they don't care. It's back to what you said in the last episode. If you think it's so great, then you come live next to it. Anyway,
Right.
Continue.
So if the state governor really wants the capital investment and the federal government decides that AI infrastructure is an absolute must for our national security, when the developer arrives in your town and, they have that $3 billion and they demand enormous amounts of like your local electricity and your water and your land, the question is, can the local community actually say no? And does a local community no even really mean no? Like you were just saying, the community said, oh, okay, hang on, no. And now Oracle or whoever it is that's building that data center is like, okay, we know you're saying no, but you really didn't mean to say no. And here's
you
why.
don't have the authority to say no.
And you don't have the
So we're going to
authority.
talk more about that.
It's a lot to think about. We're going to be covering it on the next episode of AI in Action. Until then, I know I did most of the talking, but I made sure that you got to do a lot too.
I did get to talk.
Yes, you did. Until then, we want you guys to have a marvelous rest of the week.